Hello guys, so today we are going to talk about features that Kotlin provides for writing functions. These features are in addition to what Java provides for writing functions. So these Kotlin features help us in writing very clear, concise code, and also prevents prevents a lot of bugs while we are working with functions and all. So let's jump into the code and see all of these features which Kotlin has for functions. So the first feature that we'll have a look at is the default values. So if we have a look at this code, we added a function which is add person, and in this we have a name and also an age group. So for age group, we define a property that is already there, which is senior, right? So we define a default value. So if it is not passed, senior would be taken, right? But we can pass a junior property also. So the junior age group is taken. So let's run it. So when we run it, we see here it's Jomodev as the name and the age group, which is here, which is passed here. So if we remove, we don't pass the age group, then the default value would be taken, which is senior. So this helps a lot of typing, extra typing that we normally need to do in like Java and all. And it makes it very easy for the caller to just pass the necessary arguments and all. So let's have a look at the second feature, which is the Lambda. When it's passed as a last argument, it could be moved out of the parentheses when we pass arguments. So it helps in writing very clear code. So let's have a look. So when we run this code, we see that it prints like added a new person, right? So, and again, like IntelliJ is recommending us to move it out of like the parentheses. So whenever the Lambda is the last argument, right? In that case, we could move it out of the parentheses. So here is the last parameter, right? And we're passing it. So we move it out of the argument. So it makes it very clear. Like suppose like the block was a long block, then the code is a bit cleaner as compared to like just keep continuing with the parentheses and adding it and at the end. So let's look at the third feature, which is really very helpful, which is named arguments. So here, if you see in this case, right, we have a number of arguments. Here, IntelliJ is helping us to know that which arguments matches to which place, right? But it is very easy to confuse, like for the caller to maybe pass one of the arguments before, right? So it would create a bug for us. Like suppose we pass like the age group first, right, and we pass the gender afterwards. So this should have been like the age group, but there's no warning or there is no error for us. When we run the program, only then we'll observe. So this is a common bug that happens whenever we're coding, like, and whenever we're writing functions, which takes a lot of arguments. So a good way to do that, like, is we could just use named arguments. So we could just say name is equal to this, right? And then we could say this is gender and age group, city. And now if you see, like, it doesn't matter in which order we call. So like we're just moving city and maybe we call name at the end. So it is very clear what we are passing, right? And we just match. So it doesn't depend like in which order do we pass the things and all, right? So like here name is passed as a third one. Even if we run the program, it will still print because we're just taking name and age group for the person. So name still goes as Jomodev, and the age group, which is here the second argument, where it still goes as junior, right? So it adds a lot of clarity and prevents us a lot of bugs. So let's look at the next feature. So next thing that Kotlin provides us is not making it necessary for us to return something, right? Like in this function, if it was in Java, we would have to explicitly return a void. Like we would have to declare the function as void, but in these cases, like we don't need to declare anything. So there's no concept of void. It is like if you're not returning anything, the function would return a unit type. So there is just one value of a unit type, which is unit itself. So a void somewhat corresponds to unit, right? So if you're not returning anything, we just return a unit, right? And so here, like, since the function returns unit, right? So the last statement, in case it's unit, Kotlin doesn't make it necessary for us to return it. In case it was not unit, then Kotlin makes it mandatory for us to return something, a valid type, to declare it and also explicitly return it. So the next feature that we're going to have a look at Kotlin is variable arguments. That's also available in Java, but Kotlin has a spread operator, which makes it very easy for us to pass like arrays and all. So let's look at variable arguments now. So if we have a look here, this is nothing new. We could do this in Java by declaring three dots and all, right? We could just declare variable arguments in Java also, but just ignore that. I'm not doing anything in this function, right? Just to compile. So ignore this body. But suppose we have a relevant function which actually creates a new list and all. In that case, we can pass these elements and we get a new list, right? And here we just declare the elements as the variable arguments. So let's look at spread operator if we need to pass like values from an array or something. So if you see here, now we have an array and we can pass the variable arguments by using a spread operator, which is a star, just prefixed before the array. So each of the elements of the array would be passed as a separate element to the variable arguments, right? So let's have a look when we run it. it's gonna like print. Maybe we need to print it in a better way. So now when we print all the values, we see A, B, C, D, like all of these, D, E, F are also passed as separate values, right? So we took F, where it should be G, right? In that case, we would get all the values. Right. So another feature that is provided by Kotlin is known as infix functions. So when we're calling a function, in that case, we don't need to use a dot operator. In that case, we could just call like the function by, like, first we have the object on which we want to call it, and then we use a name, and after that we just have the argument without the parenthesis. So let's have a look so that we can better understand it. So to call a normal function, we would have to use a dot operator, and then we have to use a parenthesis and pass the value. But if we make it infix, in that case, we could remove the dot operator. We could use the parenthesis. This is optional, or we could just remove the parenthesis also. So this, if you see, is much clearer and like better code. So suppose we are writing hundreds of should equals and all, like in test cases, the way we write, right? Everywhere you have to use a dot and like you have to use parenthesis. So this enables us in moving faster and writing less code, and also which is more presentable and much clearer. So those are the features that Kotlin provides for functions, and they really improve our productivity. And also in some of the cases we saw, like when we are using named arguments and all, so it prevents a lot of bugs that we see in everyday programming problems and all.